my name is Justin Kleinman, and it's my pleasure to be sitting here with Kevin Wheeler, who is founder and chairman of the Future of Talent Institute. And today I thought we'd talk about redefining how to recruit talent, essentially. And is that, well, first of all, is that more or less accurate? The way, the topic, the way I'm describing the topic.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more than just how to recruit talent. I think it's like the whole ecosystem around talent, like what's happening in general, what's happening to work, what's happening in employee development, what's happening in how people get jobs, how they do their job, and how they learn how to do their job. So it's kind of that whole ecosystem around that.
And when you say ecosystem, you're talking about interaction between employers and the actual talent or potential candidates?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the whole interaction between the employer, between potential candidates, between current employees, between society and educational institutions. So it's kind of that whole system. And if you look at employment in a broad sense, you gain a skill somehow, and then you try to use that skill by getting a job. And employers are looking for people that have those skills. And they may want to enhance that skill with some internal development or training or an apprenticeship. And then your performance is measured, and you either thrive or you go look for another job. Right? So it's kind of a whole system of how that works. And you may go back to school and get educated many times in your career. You may learn a couple different things. So it's a matter of what interests you, what interests an employer, what skills you have, what skills an employer needs, what's all that given to you, and what skills you can get in the educational system or in the community that are affordable and meet your time frames. So it's the whole kind of system around that.
I want to touch on the idea of performance measurement.
Yeah.
And in the report you wrote on the quality of hire, you talk a lot about that. Now, how do you make these things quantifiable in terms of recruiting talent? How do you make that quantifiable when we're talking about such a broad scope of industries?
Yeah. I think number one, performance management is nothing magical. It's just, how do I know as an employer if you've done your job? And how do you know as an employee that you've done a good job versus a not so good job? In many professions, it's pretty clear cut. If you're a cook, the food is either good or it's not. Right? It's either cooked properly or it's not cooked properly. You either attract customers or you don't. So it's pretty clear. If you're let's say you're learning to be a chef, you're a chef or a sous chef, and you burn every sauce, and you never do anything right. You're not going to perform, right? And you're going to either get fired or maybe retrained if the chef thinks it's some help. If not, you're going to get fired. And that's what we mean by performance management. The problem is, as you move into white-collar jobs, it's a lot more difficult to judge whether the performance is good or not. Right? So, but it's not impossible by any means. And it's really about, up front, defining what you expect from that job.
So what you're saying is it's a lot more difficult to measure the deliverables when you get to more professions that are more conceptually based.
Yes,
I guess
absolutely.
When the deliverables are conceptually based.
Sure. How do you judge if a scientific researcher is good or not?
Right.
You could look at how many patents they have or whatever, but that might not be a very good indication. So that might be a very, very tough one to come up with standards around. But it doesn't mean that as the leader of a research lab, I couldn't come up with performance expectations. Mm-hmm. I expect this is what you're going to be able to do, and judge you by those expectations. And that's how I'm going to determine if you're performing or not. And we're all performance managed every day of our lives by somebody, either our professors in school or our parents, whether we're doing what they expect us to do,
right,
or by your employer. So it's just part of life. And I think the real challenge for employers is setting down more clearly what those expectations are from people. And a lot of times you're hired to be an engineer. and okay, you're an electrical engineer. Now, what do I do? What am I supposed to do? And you need to really get that defined. Because, I expect that you're going to repair circuits or whatever it is you're going to do in a certain maybe time frame or a certain volume. And so that's what really performance is all about.
But aside from the job itself, we're specifically talking about the hiring process. Now, what needs to change specifically? Or, for example, you have job databases on the internet, monster.com. What's the other one? Indeed, and of course you have Craigslist.
Lots of different ones. Yeah.
So what's lacking there?
Well, that's a model that's probably peaked a while ago in terms of popularity because it's making a lot of assumptions. It's assuming that the job description that's posted there is accurate and really reflects the job, which if you're a job candidate, you realize is not the case. And assuming that there's people out there qualified who want those jobs and who understand what that job description means. And that's a big assumption that's proving to be less and less true. So all you're doing is very crude kind of matching, and it's self-selected matching. So I look at a job description and I say, oh, gee, I'm qualified for that, so I apply. I may or may not be qualified for that job. It's my view of what that job means. So, that's kind of a model that was early technology, sort of early concept, and I think we're moving into much more sophisticated tools today, like social media, Facebook or LinkedIn, tools that give an employer and a potential employee a better understanding of what the job's all about, a little bit understanding of that person's personality, whether they're really going to be the right fit culturally for this company. So you begin to get a lot more, if you flush out the picture a lot more than simply saying electrical engineer will do these 5 things, and you say, oh, I'm an electrical engineer and I can do those 5 things, and maybe you could, but the employer has to believe you can. You may not have the experience, and you may on top of it just be a bad fit for this company. So how do you know that as a candidate? So what's happening today is everything's more sophisticated, and I think probably more complex.
So the evolution of recruitment is, the next step in the evolution of professional recruitment is, what I'm hearing, is social networking.
I think that's where we're at today. Who knows where it may go, but ultimately it's going to be some sort of a social network or a network. It's where I can get opinions about other people who know you. I can say, what do you think about him? Have you worked with him before? I can see what the comments are that people make about you or with you. I can see what experience or jobs you've had. If I engage you in some kind of a dialogue, I can have an interaction with you. So it gives me a whole lot more ability to really know who you are than, let's say, a half-hour interview or by reading a piece of paper.
So I wanted to actually kick things off. We got off on a little tangent there, but I thought we'd kick things off talking a little bit about Future of Talent and who is Future of Talent designed to help, and why is Future of Talent important now?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good question. I started this about 7 or 8 years ago, and the reason I started it is I had lots of clients who were using my consulting services, asking me for more, broader-based information, like what's happening in the workforce. Is what we're doing the best? Should we be hiring different people or different kinds of people? What trends are you seeing economically or otherwise in work? So I figured this is a great opportunity to do some of that research and to bring some of that insight to people. So the people who come to Future of Talent are senior talent leaders, often of large companies, but not necessarily. And they are really interested in where their workforce is going and what it's going to look like in the future. So we've got generations, baby boomers' motivations, and the way you attract a baby boomer to work is totally different than the way you attract someone in their 20s.
So what's an example of where the workforce is going? Like,
Yeah, well, I'll give you some good examples. I mean, that's the beginning one. Gen Y is probably, which are those that are probably under 25, maybe even a bit younger, depending on how you define it. But those people who are 25 to 30 are kind of in a transition zone. They're not really one or the other. They're kind of a little of each. But you get into your low 20s and you're very pure Gen Y. And these are people who are really looking for opportunities that are challenging as opposed to a job or a career. So, back when I was in college, it was, you're an engineer and that's a career. And, I could go to work for like anybody, didn't matter, they're all the same, more or less. I mean, some are better than others, based pretty much on salary and benefits, not on what they'd be doing. And the assumption is if you work for GE, HP, IBM, it's all about the same. And the difference is around benefits and pay. Okay? And I'll be there forever. So you pick one that you like and you'll be there for 25 years, 30 years, and then you retire. And we all know that that's no longer for anybody. And yet the motivation for those people is security, stability, predictability, and all those things, which there's nothing wrong with those. But Gen Y is much more, what's the right word? Much more confident in their own ability, and much less seeking that kind of security and stability. And they're also not taking on some of the responsibilities that baby boomers took on, like houses and cars and mortgages and 3 children. Okay? The birth rate is very low right now. The marriage rate is the lowest it's almost ever been. We're really in a different space in terms of demographics and what people are looking for and how they want to live. So if you're young, if you're not married, if you don't have obligations around mortgage payments and car payments, you have a tremendous amount of mobility and flexibility. So their whole idea is, where's a job that's really exciting? Where's a job that I'm going to really have passion about doing this? I just don't want a job to earn a paycheck. I need money, of course, I have to live. But if I have to work at McDonald's for a couple of years while I find the right job, I'll do it. It doesn't matter to me. I'm about finding a company that's going to offer me a real challenging opportunity. That's going to say, go do whatever you want. Here, go work on this project. Be my own boss. So these are things Gen Y wants. And these are things that if you told a baby boomer this, they would say, I don't know what to do. They'd be lost. They're used to a boss. They're used to structure. They're used to hierarchy. And they'd be very, very uncomfortable.
Now, the amount of careers that a person has in their lifetime, has that plateaued or is it increasing? The last I heard, it was I heard this a few years back that it's 5. It was 5. Somebody will have 5 careers throughout their life.
I'll just change the word career to jobs.
Jobs. Okay.
I don't like the word career.
Why is that?
Well, like I just said a few minutes ago, I think career implies commitment to probably a profession for a long haul.
I see. Okay.
It may even apply staying in one employer for a long term. I think that most people, including often baby boomers, had 2 or 3 jobs before they landed on that last one. Right?
How about schooling? How about schooling? Does schooling come into play for defining what a career is versus what a job is?
I would exclude that. I would say jobs that you're paid for. Okay? And so, how many will somebody in their 20s have? Probably a lot. I don't want to put a number on it. It could be 7, could be 10, could be 20. And it will vary tremendously depending on the person. But let's just put it this way. They're not going to be hesitating to leave an employer for another job. They're not going to hesitate to switch from being, one thing to being another. We have a lot of family friends whose children are in their 20s, and they have already done 3 different careers, if you want to call it that. They thought they wanted to be this. They decided, no, that's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to be this. And they did that for 3 or 4 years, and they did something else. And I think that's okay. Back 30 years ago, if you did that, you'd be considered unreliable and a high risk, and no one would want to employ you. The model was stability, and if you hadn't been in a company 4 to 5 to 6 years, you were considered a high risk. Today, you know, if you go to Google for a year or two, it's on your resume. I've had the experience. Now I want to go to Facebook. You're there a couple of years, then you leave and you go somewhere else. It's totally okay. And so I think the number of different things that people will do in their life probably correlates exactly with their current age. So the younger you are, the more things you're going to probably end up doing in your life, because the internet makes many things possible that weren't before. Travel is much less expensive. The world is much more open. You got to remember the picture of somebody my age. I was growing up in rural New England. I never really went anywhere in my life till I was 18 years old. And then I went to the city of Boston. And, you know, and even then, most of my friends never went beyond that. So they really never, other than one or two trips in their life, maybe to England or to skiing in Utah, that's it. Their life is New England and Boston. That's the entire life we did that. And we didn't have the internet, and we didn't have TV until I was 14 years old. So my view of the world was very, very small.
I see.
And your view of the world, you had television, you had the internet, you lived in an urban cosmopolitan area, which even despite that is far more urban and cosmopolitan than it was 30 years ago. And you can travel even if it's only in the U.S. And so forth. So these things are all just are just all very what can I say? They're fundamental changes in how people look at the world and how they look at work. And you know, if somebody said to you, "Hey, I'd like to work in England for a year," what would you say?
Sure.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. You haven't got a mortgage, haven't got a wife,
Yeah.
haven't got 4 kids. You can go to England for a year, and you probably would, given the opportunity. And even without an opportunity, you might say, "I think I'll just go check it out."
So there hasn't been, we're talking in terms of generational difference, there hasn't been an increase in the importance of the profession. It's just a shift in what's important about the profession, or how much you put on what your profession.
But
right?
I'll put it to you this way. I think that if you decide that you really want to be in a profession, the difference between today and yesterday is people today, if they choose that, probably are really passionate about that profession. 30 years ago, they did that profession
For security, right?
For security, or
Okay.
because dad told them to, or it was the degree they had, and I'm not going to go back and do another one, right? So I'm stuck in this job even though I hate it. And I can't tell you how many of my friends that I hear tell me, "I hate this job, I can't wait till I retire." And I think you're not going to hear that from this younger generation. If they choose a profession, and many of them have and will, they're going to be really enthusiastic about that profession.
And that's due in part to, or the having the ability to make that choice. Is
The ability to
due
make
in
the
part
choice.
to having less obligations.
Less obligations, less social
Lifestyle.
restrictions, you know, less society pressure. You know, number one, if you tried to do that 30 years ago, it was prohibitively expensive. Society would say that you're a loser and you move around too much and you'd never get a job. You were supposed to get married. If you weren't married at 20, you were an old hag. If you're a woman, if you're a guy, like, what's wrong with you? Et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, we had tons of social pressure on people to conform to a very narrow idea of what life was all about. And today, people can choose that life or 100 other lives, and it's okay.
And just for the record, to our viewers, and are we speaking to, in the context of future of talent, are we speaking to the younger generation of workers, or I mean, how broadly does it span across
Well, I mean,
generations of workers?
We're speaking to the whole spectrum.
The whole spectrum.
From, you know, 65 to 25 or 20. But, you know, clearly those in their 60s are moving out of the workforce. That boomer, slowly, over the next decade, they'll move out pretty quickly. The group that will briefly dominate would be those people that are now in their 40s, but they're very small demographically. And the group behind them of younger people is huge and will probably dominate and change just about how we do everything. And so all we're trying to do is to see what are some of those changes kind of look like. And if you're an employer, if you're IBM, if you're whoever you are, if you're Macy's, what does this mean? Does it mean that your store is going to look like it does now? Does this mean that you're going to be hiring, programmers to, work in the lab like you did 20 years ago? Is it going to mean that you're recruiting them in the same way? And the answer is no, no, and no. And so the employers know that. They're just saying, so what's it going to look like? So we try to talk to them. We try to give them some ideas.
And in light of that, in the last 5 years, what are some of the most recent and significant shifts that you've seen in the area of talent?
I think we've talked about most of them already. I think we've seen
in the last 5 years.
Yeah, so, I think it's all been in the last 5 years. It's this mobility,
right?
This idea that you don't stick with an employer for a long time, that you can have multiple jobs in your lifetime, and you can go back to school and learn a whole new profession if you want. So you can start out as an electrical engineer, and after 5 years say, I'd like to be a doctor, and go back and become a doctor. You couldn't have done that even 10 years ago. That was tough. Today, more and more doable. It's doable for a lot of reasons.
So what I'm actually sort of trying to get at here is that I was trying to keep it as recent as since 5 years ago we had the internet. Things. It's coming up, I think, on 5 years that YouTube really took off, or is that maybe a little bit further back in history?
A lot of these things have a longer history, but they've only really been dominant for a short time.
The latter half of the last decade is, So has there been a shift, a significant shift, since things have already been globalized? Since social networking has been mainly digitalized, that we've come to rely heavily on the internet. I mean, even in the last 5 years of those 10 years the digital age,
right?
That's come about. I mean,
I think
we have covered that.
I think the fundamentals are all the same. It's just accelerated, and it's a lot clearer.
Okay.
So in the year 2001, I was talking about some of these same things that I just talked to you about, and people were going, "I really think you're, crazy. I think you're absolutely wrong. I see this and this and this," and they ticked off all the things that we assured them that things weren't changing. And I think today, there's some of that, but I think today a lot more people are willing to agree that what we're talking about is happening in their companies, and is actually happening faster than they thought it would happen.
I see it.
So I think that's really where it's all about.
All right, and specifically for the younger generation of workers, what advice do you have for recruiters and for those who are potential candidates?
Well, I think for recruiters,
especially in this economic climate.
Yeah, in this economic climate, which really doesn't change much. The market for college graduates is very strong. The market for professionals is very strong. This is a very strange recession, in that the unemployment is not amongst the highly skilled and educated. It's amongst those people that have, I'd say, moderate to minimal amount of education. That's a really important thing to remember. So this is not like the Depression of 1930s, where it was across the board fairly equal. If you're educated, experienced, professional, you've got a job. Most of them. Unemployment rate is probably 6%, 5 or 6%, which is within the normal bounds. Okay. So let's get that clear. So the economic situation hasn't really changed. Young people are inherently really optimistic this generation. And they'll say, hey, this will go away. Every recession ends. I'm not going to cop out, go sign up for 30 years here or there because of a couple of years of recession. I'll muddle through. Again, like I'm saying, many of them don't have commitments, don't have mortgages, they aren't underwater. They're in great shape. So you really look at it from somebody who's 25 and younger, this is perfect. I mean, it's really not a crisis. So, I think we can get really sad and embittered, and afraid. If I was in my 30s or 40s, I might feel particularly that way. I committed to things, and the world changed around me, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? But for this young generation, it's a pretty upbeat time, and I think they'll do just fine. They'll find their own spaces. They'll rise to whatever level they want to rise to, and it will be a much more global, fluid, and open world than we've lived in before. I think we're in a real period of transition, and the only period of time, maybe in history in America, I could equate this to would be as we switched from an agrarian economy to an industrial manufacturing economy. And the country went through huge turmoil, 2 recessions to get us into the manufacturing era. And I think we're kind of moving out of the manufacturing era into this digital information, whatever we call it, age. And there's a lot of gut-wrenching changes. And it's brutal for lots of people. And for other people, it's their dream. So you can't just paint a picture black and white. There's a lot of shades depending on where you are on the campus, right?
So to the younger generation of workers, could be a lot worse. Could have a mortgage. Could already be settled. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, right.
You could, especially what you're talking about in an agrarian economy.
Yeah.
You're stuck. You have to make something out of You have to make something out of your situation where you are, and that's it. You don't have the luxury of being able to get up and go somewhere else where there's more opportunity, right?
Okay. And these people do.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
It's been a great pleasure and very enlightening. And to all our viewers, if you want to learn any more about Future of Talent, please go to futureoftalent.org. Thanks for watching. Hello, my name is Justin Kleinman, and I'm here with the founder and chairman of the Future of Talent Institute, Kevin Wheeler. And thought today we'd talk a little bit about essentially redefining recruiting talent. And I was wondering, is that more or less accurate?
I think it's part of the answer, part of the question. I think the Future of Talent Institute tries to look at I guess I would characterize it as the talent ecosystem. Mm-hmm. In other words, what we try to do is to look at all the components of work. Number one, what is work itself? What's it look like or going to look like? In other words, how are people going to be earning a living 10 years from now? Number two, it's like, how do you get a job? How do you learn how to do the job? And how are you judged on how well or poorly you do that job? Mm-hmm. Is sort of the entire kind of what we look at, that whole picture. So it's more than just recruiting. It's also looking at employee development and training and education. Mm-hmm. It's also looking at just workforce and demographic projections. And it's looking at measuring performance and how people actually do their work.
Now you say employee development, education, and training. How about employer development, education, and training?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I think that, unfortunately, there's no formal way that happens. It's through an informal, almost market-driven mechanism. But sure, we spend a lot of time
hiring.
I mean, through the hiring process they learn. And we actually spend a lot of time at the Institute briefing senior executive teams on some of these trends and what we see happening. So they do get educated in that sense. But the recruiters are often educated because they're on the front lines, so to speak, of what's going on. And they get the challenges before anybody else.
So let's talk a little bit about the Future of Talent Institute. Who is Future of Talent designed to help, and why is Future of Talent, the service that Future of Talent is providing, important now?
Yeah, we're designed to help anyone who's interested in hiring, developing, or using people to get work done. So it's a very broad spectrum. I mean, most of our clients tend to be mid to large size corporations. We have some nonprofits. We have some smaller companies. But to really get to have a meaningful understanding of what we're talking about, it often requires that you employ a certain critical mass of people, enough people to be a challenge for you. If you're hiring one here and one there, it's probably not a big challenge. But if you're hiring 100 or 300 or 1,000, which many companies are, that's become a very big challenge. So those are our clients. Why do they need us? They need us because hiring them is a challenge. We had a surplus labor market for a long time, and it looks like we still have one. If you look
up until
10 years ago, and probably about 10 years. Some people would say 15 years ago, we began to have this so-called war on talent, and a shortage of skilled talent. Now, given the unemployment figures and so forth, it doesn't look that way. But most of that unemployment is in people that don't have very specific high-level skills. So, for example, if you're an iPhone app developer, for every one of them, there's 5 jobs. If you're a C# programmer, for every one of you, there's 3 jobs. Right? So if you have every candidate,
there's at least 3 jobs in where specifically?
Almost everywhere, whether it's in the Silicon Valley area, whether it's in New York City, whether it's in the UK or the Netherlands or Singapore, there's a demand for your skills. If you're in healthcare, you have a job, right? So, if you are skilled, if you have a necessary talent, there is almost no unemployment. And so if let's say you're a hospital and you're looking for physicians, because I work this all the time, it's a challenge. How do you attract them? And they don't want to come and work like they used to 5 or 10 years ago. 10 years ago, they might have come for a salary and stability. Today, they want a percentage of profits, or they want some other sort of activity involved in what they do. They may want a lot more opportunities to get developed and trained. They may want to be able to go to school or a lot of conferences. So they're putting a lot of pressure on employers. So employers come to us and say, what's going on? Is this normal? Are these people just being arrogant? Is this the new norm? Should I be concerned about this? So those are the questions we're being asked. They're being asked, like, what's it going to be like to be a doctor in 10 years? Are they going to be working in the same way? We're not talking about their medical skills, but how will they be employed? Will they be working in hospitals? Will they have their own private clinics? Will they be working in small clinics? What's the pattern going to look like? So if you're Sutter Hospital, how should we be developing our long-term thinking about do we open hospitals or do we open local healthcare centers? Okay? So those are the kinds of questions we often get asked.
And Future of Talent is also in the business of putting recruiters in touch with talent, or connecting recruiters and.
Not really. No.
No.
No, we're not really a talent agency. What we do is try to educate recruiters on how it might be the best way to go about finding talent.
I see.
But we don't actually put a recruiter and talent together. Okay?
That's a good distinction to me.
It would be really talking to an employer and they say, what's our recruiting strategy? Should we be going to this school or these schools, or should we be posting on job boards or in Facebook? So it's kind of like, how do you go ahead and get people? It's not so much that we're going to connect you. We're not going to connect you with anybody directly. It will give you the knowledge and skills to do that better.
And creating a framework to facilitate that.
Yes. And we give them a lot of knowledge and insight into things they could do, even best practices into what they could do to be better at attracting people or training people or getting people to do the work.
Wonderful. Well, it's all right. Wait.
Sorry.
I was just gonna wrap it up right there. Is that how long was
Yeah,
that?
go ahead.
How,
Go ahead
how long
and
was
say
that?
7 minutes and 45
Perfect.
seconds.
Perfect.
Back up, you just said something that you were going to say. So.
Right.
You were just going to end it, I think. You were
Yeah,
just going to say, yeah.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much
Thank you.
for your time. It's been a pleasure and it's been very enlightening. If you'd like any more information on the Future of Talent Institute, please go to futureoftalent.org. And thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's better. That's good. They're both good. They're just